Hello. Welcome back. Hopefully you all had a good break. A very quick, good break. I have collated all the snippets that we will do. There are like 26 snippets. And depending on the time that we have left, we'll also do some quick fires. There are like 5 quick fire questions as well. I'm not going to push them in the first bit. I'll push them later. Okay. Before we get started, I have sent in the check-in link. It is highlighted, but if you missed it somehow, then let me share it with you all again. There you go. Okay. I have less crowd, I guess, from the previous, but that's okay. I am happy nevertheless. I am excited for this part 2, where we continue all our JS work. Okay, all our JS questions, learn something new, find some quirks, learn some exceptions, and yeah, build some stuff, try and understand how things work, so that when asked in interviews, we actually know, right? We actually understand, or we actually remember. Though I would go with remember. Sorry, not remember first. I'd go with remember second, understand first. Yes. Okay. Cool. Okay. So, without any further ado, let's get started. I am going to take this snippet one. Okay. And we will go to our favorite website, because it's my favorite website, just so that I can run it there. I should basically do uncomment, copy, go, and now I'm going to hit enter. But before I hit enter, any guesses? Anyone for like what would happen? I have like var, if you remember, is kind of like function scoped. It exists everywhere. Currently, there is no function, so technically it should be present everywhere, anywhere. So remembering that, am I misleading you? Maybe, but not knowingly. What do you think will happen here? Okay, I won't waste everyone's time. I'm just going to hit enter here, and it says undefined 5. Ignore this particular undefined. Uh, I'm going to just say first. I'm going to copy this over here, and I'm going to say second, because these are the only two console logs that matter to us. Okay. And as you can see, first 5, second 5. No, ignore. Oops. First undefined, second 5. But if I run it again, okay, then it goes like this. Okay, very weird magic, and this is why it is so weird. Like using var is so weird. So what's happening here, and how can we understand it? So if you do get asked, like for whatever reason, like some project that you are interviewing for, some company you're interviewing at, and you get asked, okay, what happens if I do this, where we know that var is kind of at the function scope, what happens then? So there are no crashes, obviously. Var declarations are hoisted. Okay, you must have heard that term, hoisted. So what this means is that during the compilation, where like when JavaScript is getting ready to run the code, okay, so in that case, that declaration, okay, the declaration, not the assignment, the declaration moves to the top of the file, which means that the var x, the x variable, has moved to the top of the file. Okay, but the value remains where it is. So declaration is hoisted, values are not hoisted. So on the first run, so or like on the first, okay, in this first, JavaScript knows that x as a variable exists somewhere in the code, because it has taken that variable and or that declaration, and it has hoisted to the top of the file. And it goes like, okay, yes, I will, like at some point the user actually sets this variable to some value, but for the time being they're asking me what is the value of x, even though we have not reached the part, we have not reached that point of code where the value was actually assigned to something, the variable was actually assigned to some value. We have not reached that part, so I will kind of uh what's the word, instantiate it or initialize it with undefined. And when it actually reaches this part of code, then it goes like, okay, I know what is the new value. It is not undefined, it is supposed to be 5. So this console log prints it as 5. When I run the same code again, because it's in the same scope, it is now global scope. There is no blocks that's telling var that, oh, you are supposed to only work inside this, like not block or function. There's no function which tells or restricts it to work inside that particular function only. It's available everywhere. So this, now when I rerun it, the 5 from here is remembered. It goes here, and then we reassign it or redeclare it or assign it again to 5, so it is 5 again. So this first 5 comes because of this one, and then after declaration again, this represents this var. Okay, if you change this to 6, then it should be 5 first and then 6. But going back to our hoisted version where we don't have all these confusing things, this is why it's like, uh, don't use var. Okay, these are exactly the reason. Too quirky. If I do this, so what is JavaScript actually seeing? So if I have to like kind of denote what JavaScript is seeing in the code, it's something like this. It's var x, okay, then console.log the value of x, okay, then x is equal to 5, and then console.log x, okay. This is how JavaScript is actually kind of seeing your code, okay, or more like internally it's something like this, okay. First and second, perfect, exact same output. So this is like technically, if you can say that this piece of code, this like 3 lines of code kind of is broken into like these 4 lines of what JavaScript actually sees and works with, okay. And that's why we end up with these values: first undefined, second 5. Gotcha. uh, and if I try running this in like 102.js, undefined and 5, so good so far. I will comment this out again. Let's, so this is as I was showing, like this is exactly what's happening here. Undefined and 5. This is more like a solution. What JS sees slash evaluates as. Okay. Now the next one is going to be for functions. Okay. So we do something very similar, very quirky for functions. Uncomment and then, why do I like not learn? Uncomment, then go over here. And now, okay, before I hit enter, any guesses, anyone? All the audience? So I'm calling the function greet before I am declaring the function greet. Okay. You think it will run, not run? Will it print hello? Will it not print anything? Hoist again. Okay, so there is one answer. It will hoist again. Let's try it out. The best way to learn. Try it out. And I hit enter. And yes, it does print hello. Okay, so what's happening? So function declarations is hoist. Okay. Now I'm going to try the same thing, but with function expression. Okay. Uncomment, copy. Now, if I hit enter, do you think this will work or not? Let's try it out. Hit enter. Uncaught type error. Greet is not a function. What's happening here? So very similar. The only difference between these two, okay, I'll make it greet two. So this doesn't work, but this works. I'm calling the function on top. Okay, I'm initializing the function on top. Uh, but when it's a function expression, then it has an error saying greet is not a function. But when it is a function declaration, okay, I'm using those two words. Okay, when it's a function declaration, then it is hoisted. Okay, so the answer is that function declarations are fully hoisted. Okay, the name, the body of the function, everything is fully hoisted. So all the definitions move, like it's not physically moving to top of the file. Okay, that's also one of the things that uh, you need to know slash remember, that they're not fully like It's not like the code is moving from line number 5 to line number 1. Okay, it's during evaluation, JavaScript knows that this function eventually exists in this file where I'm running it. So I am going to fully hoist them, the name and the body. Function expressions, on the other hand, okay, function expressions, on the other hand, they are uh, like with var, okay, specifically with var, the variable name is hoisted as undefined. Okay, the variable name is hoisted as undefined. So right now, what's happening here is that it knows that greet, like remember variables are hoisted to the top. So var greet is known by our JavaScript. Okay, it knows about the variable greet. It initializes it with undefined, but then when we do undefined and call, okay, so we are doing undefined, then it goes like, well, no, undefined function does not exist, and that is why we have this error. Greet is not a function, undefined is not a function. Okay, does that make sense? So where variables are hoisted, they are initialized with undefined, so on. Like we saw that when we did snippet 1 and snippet 1a. In snippet 2, the only thing that has changed is we are now calling or invoking the function. Okay, and this has resulted in undefined. So it's like calling a function called as undefined, but that does not exist. It's not a function, it does not exist, and that is why there is a type error. Okay, so in this case, what is JavaScript actually seeing? Okay, or more like, if I have to kind of understand what's happening, so then it's something like this. I'll clear this out. It's something happening like var greet. Okay, console dot log greet. Then we have greet as a function call, and then greet is equal to that function without the name, without any parameter, and the console dot log. Okay, so this is what's happening. Like I would say, yeah, greet becomes like when we do the whole var greet equals to. Okay, so greet has been hoisted to the top of the file, or like it does not physically change location. I'm also saying that. Okay, because that's kind of a misconception slash misunderstanding. Okay, it does not mean like the code is moving places. All it means is JavaScript actually knows about it beforehand. So var greet happens because it's not assigned a value, it initializes with undefined, and that's why console.log of greet is undefined. Then we reach a point where undefined function is called. Okay, so and it goes like, well, I am 100% sure I've not seen undefined as a function name anywhere, so I'm going to just throw a type error. It's not a function. Okay, so with that in mind, and hopefully that made much sense. If I run both of them together, then it's a problem because now greet is actually defined. Okay, I have to comment out one of them to actually get the error. Okay, I'm trying to call greet. Greet is not a function. Uh, okay. So var quirky always. Okay. Var quirky always. In that case, what about let? Do you think let will be fine? Will that throw an error? Will it follow? what we understand. Let's try. Console.log A is not defined. Okay. And let me try it right here as well. Hmm. Slightly different error. Cannot access A before initialization. Do I have an error in the browser? Is there something left over? No. Slightly different. What's going on here? Can I like do a hard refresh and check? Hmm. Still, A is not defined. Cannot access A before initialization. What is going on here? Anyone? Any guesses? Anything? Okay. Uh, Nothing in the chat. Perfect. No worries. So what is going on? Like what's happening? Actually, I have a question here in the chat. Uh, like what's going on? Slash what's like why are we getting like two different answers to this? So there is like one of the answers. We'll get back to it. The order is wrong, I guess. Uh, let A should be before yes, but why are we getting like two different results? I guess that is more or less my question. So if I do like z.js, which has just these lines, okay, nothing else, nothing interfering it, and I do z.js, the error that I receive is different here versus the error that I receive in my browser window when I like let's say go to a new browser window. Reference error A is not defined versus cannot access A before initialization. Okay, do you see the difference between the two errors? What's going on? Okay, while you figure that out, why do people not use var? Okay, so in var, like we saw like so many things where var actually goes like crazy in a way, right? It's like, oh, yes, I remember from previous declaration. I remember from like, I don't know, something else. Uh, I remember like what was the value before, like so on and so forth. There's like so many quirkiness there. Okay, so that's the only reason why people don't use var anymore. It makes your code very fragile, very like less like it's a less deterministic. Okay, and that's why. Okay, coming back. So this one is very interesting one. It is not defined versus cannot access a like before what's the word before initialization in node environment. So what's happening and why? So the idea is oh hmm, okay, coming back. So the idea here is that like you like yes, this is correct. That They are temporarily in the dead zone, but what's happening? What is this dead zone? What's going on? So in the Node.js V8 engine, what we are seeing is that it cannot access A before initialization, which is a very accurate and very correct message. V8 engine, like the Node.js, which is built on the V8 engine, it knows that A exists, okay, and it is hoisted. So let is also hoisted, okay, but uh, it does not get hoisted with some default value. Okay. So it knows that it is hoisted, but there is no default value assigned to it. Like in case of where we had undefined as a default value assigned to it. In case of let, there is no default value assigned to it. So it gives a proper correct error that you cannot access A before you actually initialize it with a value. Okay. The reference error of this one, A is not defined. This is slightly misleading. Okay, the variable is the not variable. The variable is defined. It's not initialized, but whatever is the version of Chrome that I'm running here, it's like I will give a very loose error saying that okay, this is not defined or this is not available, or yeah, not defined technically, because when it encounters this console log a line, it was like at this point, yes, it is not defined for me, so I'm just going to throw a very generic error. Okay, so that's the only reason why you see what you see. So I would say in this case the Firefox one is more accurate. Okay, rather than not Firefox, the Node.js one is more accurate than the Chrome one. But if I take this snippet of code and actually run it in Firefox, okay, there we go. Of course, I have another browser. So I run this, reload, console, run this. Reference error, can't access lexical declaration A before initialization. Okay. So again, very similar to what we saw for Node.js, which was like, here you go. You're trying to use a variable which I know exists, but currently it does not get initialized with some value. So I'm going to throw this reference error, cannot access this lexical declaration, or you can say variable, before it is initialized. Now, one way to look at the difference is that if I do console.log of B, I have to delete, reload. Okay, console.log of B, then console.log of A, and then let A equals to 10. In this case, B is not defined. Okay, code does not know about it. So in this case, this is like very much correct, very much accurate, because the variable B is not defined. Okay, so there's a difference in that error message that you see, which is you cannot access it before initialization, which means that our like JavaScript compiler knows that this exists, but it would just say, okay, I am not going to uh, print anything, or I won't be able to print anything because at this point it is not initialized with any value. Okay, but when we have a variable which really does not exist, okay, in that case we see a very different error. Uh, I should, it is annoying that yeah, very different error where it says like B is not defined. Okay, doesn't care about uh, the part of A, or whatever you can say. Okay, does that make sense in terms of like what's happening? So in Node.js, in Chrome, and in Firefox, we have slightly different error messages. The one in the Node.js one is much more comparable with the Firefox one because it understands that you're trying, like, that accurately represents the hoisting of let variables. Okay, it accurately represents that, yep, 100% this thing is hoisted. I know that it exists in this piece of like file or code that I'm running. It knows about it, but because there's no value assigned to it yet, it throws the error of cannot access a before initialization, or a reference error cannot, something like that, whatever Firefox was saying. But it's different from when a variable does not exist in the file itself. Then it is undefined. Okay. So hopefully that made sense. Hopefully that was kind of understandable in terms of like what you see on Chrome is a slightly misleading error message. But the idea is that yes, we are talking about temporal dead zone. In temporal dead zones, it's the keyword is called temporal dead zone, or TDZ, uh, where variables are kind of hoisted, which means that JavaScript knows about them before running them, but they are not accessible. You can think of it as like they are not initialized with anything, they are not accessible. And that is why the error says that you cannot access that before it actually gets initialized. It's like you have a variable which points to a value later. Right now, variable is kind of hoisted to the top of the file, which means JavaScript knows about it. And right now, it's pointing to a box that is locked. Okay, because it is locked, it cannot access the value in that box. It goes like cannot access it before initialization. Okay, var goes like yes, I cannot access that box. So technically, I'm right now undefined. I'm not defined. I'm not defined to access or kind of look at any box or give a response, uh, give a error response. I'm just saying yep, I am not looking at that box, I am undefined. So var is technically also doing a hoisting where uh, not technically, sorry, where var is also doing a hoisting, but uh, it gives you a very silent undefined rather than an error of you cannot access this variable before you actually initialize it. Okay. What about if I do a const? Do you think const is hoisted or not? Before I run this, anyone? Any guesses? Do you think const is hoisted? We know let is hoisted because it's a very different error opposed to something that is not defined. What about const? Okay, I think they won't. Let's try it out. Perfect. Cannot access A before initialization. Maybe I should try making it B and B. Mm, similar. So uh, let and const are also hoisted. Okay, the difference, like in all three, in var, let, and const, is var is hoisted, let is hoisted, const is hoisted. Var also cannot like technically access it, so it gives a very silent, undefined output before it actually gets initialized with a value. But let and const give you this very loud error of you cannot access this, but your code knows about it. Okay, JavaScript knows that this variable will eventually be encountered somewhere. So it knows about it, just cannot like allow you to access the value before it actually gets initialized. Cool. So the order matters. I guess that's another thing to note here. I'm going to delete this file and I am going to kind of do here B and B, and instead of let, it will be a const. Okay. So Both of them are hoisted. Let is hoisted, const is hoisted. They go into something called as temporal dead zone, where JavaScript knows about these variables, but doesn't know the value yet because it has not encountered it in its line by line execution, and they throw an error. Okay. And now we also know that Chrome gives a very misleading error. Cool. Now, let's talk about. I will not give it a name because then you will know. Okay. Given this piece of code, what do you think is going to be console logged? So we have var a equals global, where since we are using var, it is available everywhere. We have learned that much so far. And then we have a function outer which has a var b. We know var is function scope, so we have var b uh, initialized with outer. Then we have function inner, where we have var c, which is inner. Then we console log a, b, and c. Then we invoke the function inner, console log c, and then we invoke the function outer, and we can also console.log b, a comma b. This is my 1, this is my 2, and this is my 3. I will replace this code snippet with this. Okay. Uh, any guesses what will be printed in 1? Okay, let's start with 1. What do you think will be printed in 1? It won't take too much like time of yours. Uh, let's hit enter and let's see what actually gets printed for 1, 2, and 3. Uh, in terms of 2, I'll also do b comma c, and in terms of 3, I will do a comma b. Perfect. And perfect. So 1 gets printed, uh, and it says 1 is global outer inner, global outer inner for this one. Then inner is called, and it gives the error of C is not defined. Okay, let me break the console log into 2 parts. So 2.1 is B, and then 2.2 is C. Then we have 3.1 A, and we have 3.2 B. Yes, we can also replace this one. If I hit enter, okay, so 1 global outer inner, 2.1 is outer, but then 2.2 never reaches, and then everything else basically falls apart after that. So what's going on here? Okay, so when JavaScript looks up a variable, it walks up the scope chain. Okay, it walks up, and that is very important to understand, that it goes from inside over to outside, not the other way. Okay, so one way outward. Okay, think of like an arrow which is going upwards like this. That's how JavaScript will kind of look up a variable. So it starts from like uh, when we run this whole piece of code, we have called the outer function. Okay, outer function is right here. Inside it, we have, like, when outer function runs, it declares this variable and then it calls the inner function. Inner gets kind of run, and that is why we see this particular console log first. Okay, so outer calls this particular code block, outer declares a variable, and the other piece of thing that it has to run is this inner function. This piece of code gets run and it console logs this first. Okay, this console, like, one is console log first. In that console log, what we have said that there is this variable a. Okay, now it tries to find a, okay, by going like, okay, do I have a declared here? No, I don't. Can I read? Can I go one level up and see if there is a declared in the outer scope? No, it doesn't. Can I go one level up and see if a is declared in the, like, the outer scope of this? So if this is my current scope, this is my parent scope, this is my grandparent scope. So it goes and finds, yep, a is declared and I can access it. So it prints global. Then it tries to go for b. Is b declared in this block? No, it isn't. Can I go one level up and find it? Yes, I can. There is b, so it prints b. And then there's c. Is c declared in this block? Yes, it is. It prints c. So global, outer, inner. These three things are printed. Okay. Now let's come to this particular console log, 2.1. So this particular console log, this is after the function has been invoked. Okay, so function invoking happens, so this piece of code runs first. Then JavaScript is like, okay, now that I have invoked the function, run it. Now let's go to the next line of execution, 2.1 b. Is b in this particular function scope, in this particular box or block, not box, block? Yes, it is. Here's outer, and there we go. Then it goes like, okay, 2.2 c. Is C in this particular block? No, because it's actually nested inside here. But JavaScript looks for variable upwards. It does not go inside the functions. Okay, so it will not go like outside to inside. It goes inside to outside. What is the outside to this particular function? The outside to this particular function is this var a only, this global thing. So it goes like, okay, C is not found in this block. So this block is from this function outer var b till here. It cannot find it and it throws the error, reference error. Now let me create the z.js with this exact same thing. Do you think they will have a difference between what gets printed, what gets logged? Let's see. Same error. C is not defined. C is not defined. Reference error. C is not defined. And it tells that when it tried to kind of get the value for this particular variable c, it first checked. So it's almost, okay, JavaScript is almost like, this thing is hidden for me. I can't really see inside this box, but I can see this box and I can see this global part. Okay, not this part actually. I can see everything that's here, but not inside this, and I can see everything outside. So C cannot be found in this part of block. So it tries to go outside, cannot find it there. Then it goes like, oops, no, C is not defined, must not be defined. That's why I can't see it. C is not defined, that's why I can't see it. But if I do like B, A, and then C, 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3, oh, oops, that is my bad. This works, this works, 2.2 works, but 2.3 fails. Okay. I remove this bit of code. Okay, I'm going to comment that out. Now I have the only uncommented parts are this console log 1, and then console log 2.1, 2.2, 3.1, and 3.2. Now let's see what would happen. So 1, we know how is that working. 2.1, we saw, okay, b is actually defined in this box. If I don't, like, it cannot see inside the inner function, but it can see every variable that's in the outer function, so b is working. A is not in the outer function, but it is at one level outside when JavaScript is searching for that variable, so even that works. 3.1a, it cannot see inside this particular function, okay, but it can see on the outside, and it actually finds the variable, so it prints 3.1 as global. Then there's 3.2 b, okay, and it goes like, b, I have no idea, because I can't see inside the outer function, I cannot see inside the inner function, cannot see anywhere else, it's not defined in the piece of code that I can see. Error, reference error, okay. Similarly, if I do 3.3 for C, that should technically also give me the same error. Oops, again, commenting out things and forgetting to uncomment. Okay, should be fine now. And there we go. Outer global, global, and C, not defined. Okay, because again, it cannot see inside the functions. So does the scoping and scope chain make sense? Does it make sense that how JavaScript looks for a variable? Okay, it's like a one-way scope chain which goes from inside to outside, and this is the foundation of closure. Okay, when we come like to any questions related to closures, this is what you need to remember. Where is the variable? Where it is called versus where it is declared. What are the scopes? Am I calling it inside a function, and is that variable in that function or in the outside of it or in the outside of it? I can actually call that function, or not call that function, but call that variable. I can use it, works perfectly fine. If I'm using a variable which is defined on the inside of another function, I cannot see it. Okay, so one way scope chain goes from like current scope to parent scope to grandparent scope, so up the tree kind of. Okay, and yeah, I guess that's it. Any questions, anyone? Oh, is it chilly? What's the temperature? Let me see. It is 4 degrees, not that bad. 4 degrees is nearly summer. Joking again. Okay, since there are no questions, I am going to presume that everyone understood everything. I am going to just enhance this one. This will throw a lot of errors if you run it like just like that. That is why we have these videos, the companion videos, as I would say. But don't worry, once all these sessions are done, we will, like, I will, not we will, I will uh, use Copilot. Yeah, I'll use Copilot to kind of enhance and add more description, add JS doc comments. Okay, next question. Let x equals to 10. We have a function where inside which we have x equals to 20. We are redeclaring x. Okay, I'm console logging x, calling the function, console logging x again. Very important. Okay, can you redeclare same variables in using let? Technically, we have seen this, right? So you would know. Okay, I'm not going to waste time. Let's hit enter. This is 20. This presents 10. And let me just enhance this by saying this is 1 and this is 2. 1, 20, 2, 10. Perfect. Works. What's happening? Let's talk about this one. Now, there's a term for this. Okay, let me come back on screen because I'm going to explain. Okay, so the technical term for this is called as shadow. Okay, so the inner x variable is shadowing the outer x. Okay, or more like, or not more like, the other way to think about it is the precedence, or the other way to think about in terms of our scope chain is JavaScript looks for variable in the current scope first. If it does not find it, okay, I'm going to focus on that word too much. If it does not find it, then it goes one level up. But if it finds it in that same scope, doesn't do anything, doesn't touch it. Okay. So what would happen here in this case? I've declared all of this. Fine. I call the function foo. It goes in this function, declares x, console logs, and it goes like, oh, I need to print the value of x. Where is the nearest x to me? The nearest one is just one line up. So I'm going to just use that value and print it. Then we come to this particular line. Now, like this has finished execution. There's nothing else remaining here. Then JavaScript comes to this line and it goes like, okay, in this line, I have to find the value of x. Where is my nearest x in this particular scope? Remember, JavaScript does not look inside the function. So this is not kind of accessible to it. The nearest x to it is this one declared on the first line, and it goes like, yep, 2 is 10. Okay. So if you ever see, so I guess the interview takeaway here is that if you ever see same variables but in different scope, depends on what they are declared with. If they're declared with, like, let's say let, in that case, you can follow the scope chain. What if they're declared with var? Question, what would happen now? Hit enter. 1 is 20, 2 is 10. So regardless of whatever, scope chain and the shadowing is still followed. Okay. So shadowing, it's like this variable shadows a variable of the same name depending on which scope it is called. I guess understanding, like, I guess not complicating it and just saying, yep, scope chain. If I can find that variable nearest to me, okay, while going upwards, I'll use the nearest one. Okay. And finally, if I change this to const, there we go. Cool. Uh, Again, regardless of whatever you use to declare the variable, let const or var, when it tries to access that variable, it tries to see in that same scope, goes one level up, goes one level up, and always goes from current scope to parent scope to grandparent scope to great grandparent scope, and like up the chain, never down the chain, not change, chain. Okay. Any questions, anyone? I'm not pushing all of this because we have like a lot of snippets left. Like 26 snippets. I have 26 snippets. Okay, no questions. Okay, so I had to drink water. My throat was parched, like literally. Okay, next question. Where are we? There we go. Now, the question, I have this create counter where I have a let count, and inside that there is a function. You can say it's a non-named function where we have count plus plus return count, and I call counter, create counter, and then I call counter, 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 like 3 times. Okay. counter is this particular variable. Okay, what will happen? What will it print? What will these three console logs print? Any guesses? Okay, I have one guess, which is one. Uh, Nearly correct. Let's try. One, two, three. Okay, it prints one, two, and three. Let's try it again with like slightly more indication. A, B, C. Okay, A, B, and C. I guess this should be good. A1, B2, C3. So these three lines get printed, and here's what we get. So what's happening here? Okay, this is closure, very simply. And now let's understand them. So what's happening? We call counter equals to create counter function. So create counter function. So when JavaScript kind of encounters this particular line, it first encounters this function. It goes like, "Yep, I know this function will be created at some point." It's a function declaration, not an expression. Hoisted to the top, not physically moving the code, but just remembering, knowing that I will get this function at some point, and it does get that function some point right here on this particular line, and it goes like, okay, I have to call the counter function, create counter function. So I run this function, and that's it, and assign it to this particular variable counter. Okay, so now this function has finished execution, and now the variable inside this function, this count variable, will now be garbage collected, which means there is no one else who's referencing it as per, like, after this line. If I don't have these console logs, then we are basically saying that there is no one referencing this count variable. It will be garbage collected, it will be deleted from like JavaScript's memory. Okay, so that we can free up some memory. But the returned function from create counter, okay, the return function from create counter, that is still referencing this count variable. So this returns a function, and this function still is referencing the count variable. So this is what it's like. This particular function is closing over or closes over this count variable, and that is why the word is closure. Okay, so closure is nothing but a function uh, that you have, which uses variable from its outer scope. Okay, because this count variable is not in this particular block. Okay, so if I have to, like, let's say console log it, it has to go one level up, right? So it kind of, the inner function is closing over the outer, like, variable from its outer scope, which is, it is still kind of referencing. And now what happens is, every time we call this counter, it tries to, like, it has access to this count variable, and that is why it keeps on incrementing. Okay, so it accesses the same count variable and increments it and increments it and increments it. So the variable lives on because this closure keeps it alive. Can I add some more console logs? So I can add, I'm just trying to like add console logs, and it's very difficult when we add it there. Mm, mm, mm. Give me 1 second. I'm just trying to basically like add more console logs. Mm, think this will work. Let's try. Uh, Let me try it out first. I think this should work. Okay, cool. So I have improved that function to kind of be okay. This. So create counter function still same as before, and now inside this function. Oh, I have two messages. Yeah. Oh, don't worry. Yes, I've done exactly that. So I have the outer function create counter. We had let count equals to 0. We have some console logs. Create counter called. Count initialized to this particular value count. Okay. Then we return the function increment and return. So there's a new function that we are returning. We are returning a function. Okay. That's important. Then we are saying, okay, there's a console log inside, increment and return called. So this is the function count before increment. Then we increment the count, which means we increase its value by 1. Then we console log count after increment, and then we return the value of the count variable. So we are returning the value of the variable count from this function, and this function is technically returned to anyone who calls create counter. So anyone who calls create counter will hold a reference to this function. Okay. Now I have console log create counter, counter equals to create counter, then this line, then console log, and then this. Okay. Let's make this result one, result two, and result. I mean, well, actually, third time, second time, first time, it's fine. Perfect. Hit enter. So there we go. So step one, we first encounter. Okay, we reach this particular line. Console log creating counter that gets printed. Then create counter called. Actually, can I do this in z.js? No, 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 no. Yeah, I think better looking. If I can align it to the right side, close this, and this, clear this, run this again. And okay, I think this is, oops, load again. Okay, should be visible to everyone. Hopefully. So we first encounter this particular line, create counter. So there is a create, like creating counter. Then create counter called. Okay. Where is that coming from? Because we have or instantiated or called this function, uh, create counter. Okay. It goes to this function. And what is the console log that it gets? Like, what's the first console log it finds? It finds this particular console log, create counter called, count initialized to 0. And then what happens after? There's nothing else that happens here. Okay. There is no other console log. There is an inner function, but the inner function, no one has called this inner function. Like if I search for increment and return, there are only two references. One is the function name, and then inside a console log. Okay. If I change this to inner function called, okay, then again, now we have definitely zero references to this function anywhere. But I still have all these one, two, three. So increment and return, there's literally just one reference to it, which is this inner function, but no one has called this inner function. So all these lines of code are not executed. So we directly reach this particular line after the first console log, like, or the second console log. After this particular console log, we reach this particular line, which says create counter finished executing. Okay, done. Now we have the console log calling counter. Okay, first time, and we print out the result. So console.log result is counter function has been called or invoked. Why is this a function? Because we actually gave it, or we said that whatever is the response from this create counter, save it in the counter. Okay. So if I just quickly print type of counter, you will see that the type of the variable counter is a function. So if it's a function, I can call the function. Okay. Another way to look at it is print counter, and I remove the type of. So I'm literally just taking the variable and printing it. So this will basically say, yep, there is a function, and inside that function, there is what it's returning. The returned function name is increment and return. Okay. So this counter variable in holds a reference to increment and return function. So now whenever we do count, like call the function, okay, the way we call the function, whenever we do that, what happens is this. It We are printing calling counter first time, then the inner function is called. Okay. Count before increment is 0. Then there is an increment, which means it increases by 1. Then console log count after increment is 1. And the return count basically means that it's returning the final value of this variable count. And that is why result is printed as 1. Then we do it the second time. Same. Now inner function called. So inner function, which is increment and return, gets called. This line gets printed. Count variable. Now this is interesting. It remembers that the previous value of the count variable was 1. Okay. It holds a reference to it. So so now because we have called this function again, it increments it by going to this particular line number 7 and increments it by 1. So 1 becomes 2. So result is returned as 2 at this line. Then we call it the third time. Again, the same thing, holds a reference, goes to like call this function. Inside this function, it remembers now what was the previous value. It remembers it was 2. I have to increment it. So it becomes 3. Result is 3. So now this is what we call as closure. Okay. Physically, if you have to remember, there is a particular memory location where, like, in some part of our code, like, or in some box, uh, if you think of memory locations as like boxes, okay, if you think of it as that, then what we are doing here, or what we are trying to do here in this case, is that, okay, I hold a reference to, like, when the create counter is called for the very first time. In that case, we are holding a reference to it, and in that box we say that the value of this count variable is 0. Now, after this function has finished running and we assign it to some variable, now that variable is holding a reference to the inner, like, returned output of this function, and it goes like, okay, now every time I call this variable, it has to go, and because the inner function holds a reference to the outer variable, it goes like, I will go to the same box and update the value. Okay, so now if I get to call like 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, I keep going to the same box and I keep updating the value. So JavaScript is like, I cannot garbage collect or delete this box, because there is someone who keeps on coming and like updating the value. Okay. Okay. So I guess that's it about closure bit. Uh, okay. Uh, so I do have one request in the chat, which is to put a debug pointer. Can we put a debug pointer there? Let's try. I am going to delete this. I'm going to put this with a debugger right here. And I'm going to delete this. I'm going to put this here. Okay, here goes it. I hit enter, runs the code. Debugger has paused. Okay, so we have reached a point where the debugger has been called. Now, in the scope, okay, in the scope of my code, there is this local, which has something like this, but there is this closure where the count is set to 0. Now I try to step over to the next call. It goes to the console log that would have been printed. I go to the next call. It goes to count plus plus, that would be printed. Console log, count after increment, return count. And as you can see in the closure scope, count has incremented to 1. And increment and return is going to be the next thing. I step over. Now this line of code gets called the console log result, which is the counter. Perfect. Then it goes to the next line, which is the console log counter second time. Okay. So this is going to get printed. Then it goes to this console log and it tries to be like, oh, this calls the function again. I need to go to my function, increment and return, debugger. So it has stopped. It goes like, okay, let's print this console log. Count is 1 at this point. It increments it, and now as you can see this line, it says the count is 0. Sorry, not 0, 2. Okay, so in the scope of closure, count has increased to 2, and there's the counter. script that is running. Okay, with the function name increment and return. And now if I can do step on to the next function call, and then it prints the result counter global will have something and nothing else here. Then we go to the next function call again in the scope. It's like must be saved in one of, not in here actually. Ignore me. This is the global. This is called stack. Okay. Go over to the next one. Next function debugger again. Closure scope. Okay. Remembers count to 2. Then we try to go to the next console log. This script counter increment and return has been called, and it goes like, okay, do I have any closing variables, any variables that I am keeping reference of or track of? Yes, I do. Count variable, can I increment it? Yes. What was the previous value? 2. Increment it to 3. Perfect. Let's kind of print it out and then return it. And once it gets returned, here it gets printed. Counter, this variable holds a reference to function increment and return that has done all of this. And perfect. Done. Now if I go into the result, there we go. We have called this function creating counter, blah, 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 print counter, blah, 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 calling counter first time, and then after second time, then third time. Okay. So with debugger, that's also done. Any questions, anyone? Hopefully now it makes sense with everything. I am glad. And I hope I answered your question there, right there. How we are holding reference to variable, what is the closure scope, and everything else. Okay. Perfect. I think that was the longest one that I have gone through with closure. I guess, yeah, maybe next time I will do it in this very similar manner. Actually, thanks for this suggestion of putting the debug pointer. Can I just. So, this was our simple snippet. Let me create snippet 6a with debugger. I can call this create counter 2, create counter 2, increment and return 2. Anywhere I find a function, I'm going to name it 2, 2, create counter 2, create counter 2, counter 2, counter 2, counter, counter. Sorry, it was just like, if you have to run both of those code together, then yes, this is the only way I can think of. Create counter 2 finished. Counter 2, 2, 2, 2, counter 2, not 3. Counter 2, creating counter 2. Okay. Hopefully, all of them make sense. Yeah, okay. Perfect. And now, my question to you all. If I change this from let to const, will this work? I'm going to also remove the debugger. Question to everyone. I changed the variable from let to const and I've left everything as is. Will this work? Uh, okay, no answers. I presume yes or no. Let's go with maybe. Hit enter. Nope. Yes, perfect. Oh, thank you so much. Yes, it won't work. So it tries to do everything. The time it fails is when it has to increment. Okay, everything else is fine until the function has not been called. Things were very happy, like hunky dory. Everything was working fine. In a function called count before increment, yep, all good. Then it comes to incrementing, and it goes like, uh, that was a constant variable. You're trying to increment a constant variable. No, that's not allowed. And that's where it fails. Assignment to constant variable. So it fails because it was a constant. And you're like, okay, you can't do that. But what if this was an array of 0? And when it comes to this part, I just push 1 to it. Now will it work? So every time this function is called, it pushes 1 in the array. Do you think this will work now? Anyone? Quick guess. Oh, let me just hide this. It will. Okay. It will. Let's try it out. Hit enter. There we go. So it goes like, okay, before increment, there was a 0. After increment, it became 0, 1. Then we call it second time, it became 0, 1, 1. Okay. And result is 0, 1, 1. Then the third time, 0, 1, 1 becomes 0, 1, 1, 1, 1. And result is 0, 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay. So technically, it remembers closure over not just variables, over in arrays as well. Can I say that? And if this was instead of const, it was let at this point, will this work? Should, right? I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. Like let technically actually allows reassignment, so it should definitely. Right? Okay. Uh, any questions, anyone, before we move to the next one? Like, let me actually change this to. This is boring. So the only boring part is this, that I have to like, where I think of more things and then I go into this whole uh, loop of let me also show this thing. Let me also show this thing. Under three, under three, under three, 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 three. Okay, if it works, perfect. What was this? Snippet 6b. Closure with array. Six A with debugger and 6b closure with an array. Okay, next one. Sorry about the time taken. Um, but just to make sense from an interview question perspective, and so that you never forget, I had to do what I had to do. Okay, now the next one is closure in a loop. So I have for var equals to 0, I less than 3, I plus plus set timeout. I'm calling the function console.log I, and every 100 milliseconds, or not every 100 milliseconds, after 100 milliseconds, this will print out. What will it print? Question to everyone very quickly. What do you think this will print? Okay, I'll just run this and hope for the best. I'm expecting if it is a loop, it should print 0, 1, 2. And it prints this three, three times. Okay. What is this eight? No idea. Let's try this out in z.js. Clear. It prints 333. Okay. What? 333? Okay. Very, very, very weird. Let me try the same thing with, instead of var, because we know we hate var. Instead of var, let me do I. Oh, sorry, let me do let. And instead of I, I'm just going to rename it to J, just so that we don't have any issues anywhere. J, 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 and perfect. Let's run this. 333012. Okay, so what's going on? I guess this would be like one of the closure questions, or like one of the trickier closure questions. What's happening here is, in like, we know that var is kind of function scoped. Okay, var is function scope, which means for all of these I, for every iteration, okay, or there is one variable I declared, and it is shared across every iteration that happens. So in the first iteration, I is kind of 0. Then in the second iteration, the same I, because in the same function, it goes like, okay, where is I? Where is the nearest I declared? It's declared in this. And can I like is can I update it? And because it's a var variable, it goes like, yep, you can update it. It is the same as before, and it updates it. Okay, it like kind of updates it to from 0 to 1, and then from 1 it updates it to 2, and then it also updates it to 3, even though it needs to be between 0 and less than 3. Do you get the dilemma? It updates it to 3, even though I have explicitly stated that it needs to be updated with from 0, start from 0, and should be less than 3. Okay, so that is the complicated, or like the quirky bit. Let's go with what ideally you want. Okay, so ideally what you want, or what should happen, is that when we use the let keyword, we are saying that there is a variable j declared which starts at 0. It needs to be like, this j needs to be less than 3 and j plus plus increment. Okay, now after the set timeout, like after this 100, okay, and we are printing console log. So what we have said, that after 100 milliseconds, console log all the values of j that you have received. So during every iteration, so j was initially 0, it like got it as 0, and then it remembered like this is the particular j that was 0. Then in the next iteration, you're basically saying that when we use the word let, it is going to create a new variable. Okay, so a new j is created, and that is why when it goes to the next iteration, it goes like, okay, j has increased to 1, console log j would basically be 1. And then we have the next iteration where j is a new j is created. Okay, and that one is going to be like, okay, it has increased to 2, so let's print 2. And then it goes like, okay, let's go to the next iteration, 3. uh, oh, it doesn't satisfy this condition, so I'm not going to do anything. And now after 100 milliseconds, we have 3 console logs which starts from 0, then goes to 1, then goes to 2, and then goes to nothing. Okay, there's nothing else after that. 0, 1, and 2. Okay, so that is the good thing about using a let. Okay, because in each time in the for loop, it is creating a new variable in each iteration, and there is this whole callback. So it is calling back, or or let's say closing over. Okay, the closure bit. So this is where closure becomes important. It's like it's closing over its own version of J. Okay, so there are three closures happening on three different values, which is why we have three different results. Now let's talk about the var one, where things kind of go crazy. So what's happening? So here, uh, when or when it actually prints out, the loop is exiting, okay, after 100 milliseconds, but the callbacks haven't been called yet. Okay, so the loop runs and it exits, and then we have the set timeout callback. And when the set timeout callback actually tries to print it, it goes like, I am looking at the same eye, okay, at the same eye. And in that same eye, what's happening? On the first iteration, that I was 0, and this condition 0 less than 3 was true. So it was like, okay, I should be 0. It starts with 0. Next iteration, I is going to increment by 1. So 0 becomes 1. 1 is less than 3. This is true. So the same I has changed to 1. Then in the next iteration, I becomes 2. Okay. So 2 less than 3, that is a true condition. So since it is true condition, I becomes 2. In the next iteration, I is increased to 3. 3 less than 3 returns is false. Okay. So the loop exits, but I is still left at 3 because that is what it was incremented to. So a loop run like works in the format as an increment first, then compare. And if it is after comparison true the, then do something else, exit, right? Sorry about that. So increment first and this then compare, and in that comparison when it becomes false, it exits the loop, but the variable stays what it was before. Okay, so it stays at 3, and that is why when the actual time comes to print it, it goes like, okay, I was called 3 times because of this for loop, and the last value of I that I know of, or the one that I remember, is 3. So it goes like 3 3 3. Okay, does that make sense yet? Mm, okay, uh perfect. So it does make sense. I am glad. Let's see. What can I do? Can I try with a debugger? Mm, My second, I'm trying to like add a debugger to see if I can like kind of make much more sense out of it. Mm, okay, I think this is fine. I guess like I can add a debugger, but feels like it's a bit more annoying to see it in the debugger. Maybe let's give it a try. Let's clear all of this, and now let's run it. Okay, cool. I hit enter. There's my what's the word? There's my debugger coming into picture. I go into the current this one in the global scope. It's a global scope where you know, and there's a variable I which is currently 0. I step over and I call the set timeout. I is still 0. Then it increments. See, like the part it highlights, it increments first, okay, and then it compares. So at some point, I should have I becoming 1. Where is it? This was like this a bit annoying. Yeah, I becoming 1. Okay, and then it compares and it goes like, okay, now I compare it. I is this less than 3? Yep. Goes into console log debugger, and then set timeout. It's called not yet there. Then we go into the increment part. Increment has completed. Now I has become 2, and then we compare. Goes into this iteration, debugger, set timeout, comes back, increments. Now increment has completed. Okay, comparison happens after increment has been completed. Increment has been completed. I is 3. Now this function, like this comparison will return false because 3 is not less than 3. Returns console log and loop finished, and set timeout finally is getting called, and there we go. Okay, so loop finished. I equals to 3 at this point. Then set timeout gets called. Okay, set timeout happens after. So set timeout function is called at this point, and it goes like, okay, which what do I remember about I? I remember that I was basically 3 because I have like I need I it remembers that set timeout has to run 3 times, and in each iteration it has to go and reference the value of I. It goes to try to reference to the value of I, and it goes like, okay, it's set to 3, so I have to print 3 3 3 every 100 milliseconds. Okay. I try to do this one, should do similar thing. So I go in here in the block scope, not in global scope now. There is J, then goes to set timeout. So at some point, like I think in the call stack, possibly where was set timeout? Like it sets out like I have to kind of call this set timeout later. Okay. And call this down. Not yet. Okay. J increments after increment. This is the value of J, and it was the set timeout. Mm, where does it show? I remember it was somewhere here. I don't remember where exactly it was, but it would be somewhere at this point where it would be like set timeout and it will kind of remember. Okay, so I'm trying to basically show you where, but the idea is okay, console log, debugger set timeout, it's still not the time. Function call increment, J becomes 2, increments compares, perfect. Then J becomes 3, perfect. And then it kind of goes outside. Now set timeout gets called. Now we have 3 callbacks. And in this is the first one, set timeout. Why is this not working? Show more. Listen breakpoints. I think set timeout. I think somewhere here. I think it's in here somewhere. That set timeout. hmm And now I loop over it in this block again. So now notice this, that it remembers that the J for this particular block when this callback function happened was 0. So that's why it remembers 0. Then after that, in the next callback function, set timeout goes like when I was called, the J that I was referencing was 1. So that's why it prints 1. And then the next call, uh, okay, set timeout gets called. In that callback function, it remembers that the variable that I was closing over, or the closure variable, at that point J was 2. So it's going to basically console log the J as 2, and then it broke. Okay, like it came out of the loop. And that's how we end up with 0, 1, and 2. Okay, I guess this is nearly the time for me to end the session. You have a next session with Iro about Superbase 101. So I'll give Iro time to basically set up and kind of you all to have a quick break. We did have a lot of other questions pending. Snippet 7, snippet 8 is what we've done. Snippet 9, snippet 10. So what I will do is I'm going to push everything from here, and then you all can kind of run them individually. And tomorrow I have the next session where I will quickly like run this and show you the answers before we move to the React bit. Any questions, anyone? Uh, did it make sense with respect to like debuggers? I'll try and add more debuggers, and I also need to see how can I uh, see or view the set timeout. Okay. I'm 100% sure there was a way, but I just don't remember. I'll have to Google that up. Okay, any questions, anyone, before we end this session? It is nearly the time. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something new. Hope you understood closure better. Hope you understood where we are looking for the variable with scope on every run. What is it looking at? Which variable does it remember? What is the value of that variable in terms of var what happens, in terms of let what's happen, what happens. In terms of const, this will never run, just by the way. Okay. Because if you use const, then you're trying to, why do I have debugger here? But anyways, it goes like, nope, I can't do that. You're trying to assign to a constant variable. Okay, there is a question. Is this saved as a video somewhere? Yes, on the YouTube channel of Major League Hacking. So if you go there, you will find everything that we have done in the first two sessions, and also my previous sessions. Also, not just my previous sessions, all these awesome streamers who have a lot of previous sessions, you'll find it there. Okay. Now, one last thing before I end, which is feedback. So once again, I've shared the link in the chat. Please do provide feedback. This was part 2 of the session. Okay. We interview prepared part 2. Sorry, part 2. Let me know how you liked it, things that you would want to see, and I will see you all tomorrow. Enjoy the next session after this. I will not take too much time. Cheers. Thanks a lot, everyone, and bye bye.